items. Mr. Estrada is raising his hand. Jerry.
No, I just got my answer. I wanted to confirm with the clerk that we were live on YouTube, and I see that we are now. Thank you.
Yeah, no, she had announced that. That's why I opened up. Hopefully Christine and I were coordinated there. Okay, I'll back to any questions or comments on either the minutes or either of the two cash reports. Okay, I see Chuck actually has the actual LA Dodger Hawaii shirt. That's even better yet. Man, we came prepared today. Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
A motion by Director Tabor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Director McQuarrie made the second, and we'll do a roll call vote on the consent calendar approval. Director Sarkar.
To approve.
Lamberger.
Aye.
Perotti.
Aye, but I need to abstain from the minutes. I was not here at the last meeting.
Okay, Christina, please note that. McQuarrie.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
And Chair Davis votes yes, and so we basically have 7 yeses on the minutes and 6 with 1 abstention on the cash. I'm sorry, flip that. 6 in abstention on the minutes, 7-0 on the cash report. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. It's early in the morning. I'm still confused. Concluding the consent calendar takes us to public comment. This is for anyone in the public who wishes to speak items within MTD's jurisdiction, but not on today's current agenda. Madam Clerk, is there anyone wishing to speak under general public comment?
I have no public comments.
Okay, not seeing any. Item 7 is an announcement. The announcement is the acceptance of the resignation of Bill Sheeler. Bill resigned effective October 3rd, 2021 for personal reasons. Bill, for those of you who are new to the board, he is the 7th member, which is appointed by the board itself. So we will go through a recruitment process and we actually appoint that particular position. So we'll come back at a future meeting and talk about our process and how we're going to proceed in terms of outreach and selection through as we go forward. That takes us actually to a bittersweet item. Item 8 is a recognition of retirement for Messrs. Brad Davis and Mike Cardona. Jerry, you want to open this one? Both these gentlemen basically have been with MTD quite a long period of time. I've had the pleasure of working with them for decades now. So please open this up for me.
Will do. Happy to do so. First of all, I'd like to thank Mike and Brad both for their years of service to MTD. You both have done a tremendous job for the organization. I mean, the clerk does have something that she will read on behalf of the district, but before I hand it over to her, Mike, 45 years. A lot of people don't know how much you've done to keep this place running. I think Director Sarkar has some insight on that, but the rest of us, that worked with you, you've always been respected and admired. I can assure you of that. I mean, you were really to me, the heart and soul of the maintenance department. You're what kept that electric vehicle fleet going, just through the 90s, but also 2000s. You kept that fleet going probably an extra 10 years. An amazing piece of work. You made it through to see, the transition to, more modern electric vehicles. There was no other agency in the country doing what we were doing for years. And you were really the one behind the scenes that was making it work. And for that, I know I will always be grateful. And I don't know if people of our industry should, at some point recognize, what you've done and accomplished. It's been tremendous. And I think you're probably the last employee, or one of the last, at least on the management side, whose tenure spanned all 4 general managers. You worked for all of us, and I'll say it, thank you on behalf of everyone here at MTD for what you've done. And Brad, likewise, you brought me in to the organization, over 30 years ago, and you've done, amazing job. I learned so much from you on the financial side and what it is to run, the transit business end of it. You've spearheaded all of our major projects. through that time. The consolidation here at Terminal 1, this building being constructed was your project. You did a tremendous job. I don't know if people realize how hard you work. Mike does. I think both of you, when I was coming up, were two individuals that I saw working, 10 hours a day, just getting it done. Just the commitment was tremendous. And, Brad, I wanted to recognize you for that. How much you've shared, and you've taught a lot of us when it comes to project management and just attention to detail. The number of projects, the transit center refurbishment, you were handling the finance side of that, but as well as all of our construction projects over the years. It's just, losing the two of you at the same time, again, as Dave says, bittersweet. Great, happy for the two of you, making it to retirement. Got our hands full to try to replace you. It's going to be impossible, but we're going to do what we can. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to the clerk to read what we've put together for you.
Good morning. We'll start with Brad. In recognition for 32 years of distinguished service, including serving as Director of Finance and Administration, Controller, Chief Procurement Officer, and Assistant General Manager for Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District, acting as project leader in the district's expansion and construction of MTD's current facilities at 550 Olive Street, overseeing vital capital projects such as fleet replacement, infrastructure development, business software upgrades, and the transit center renovation, providing invaluable recommendations for the development of an agency cash reserve policy and other post-employment benefits, devoting many years for the betterment of the Santa Barbara community. Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District recognizes the exemplary and loyal service of Bradley P. Davis with great pride and heartfelt gratitude.
Applause. Hang on. I want to
Yeah.
let Brad make any comments he wants to make at this point. Brad, you're never shy. Come on, man.
Well, good morning, everyone. And I really appreciate the kind words. I've spent my entire career here at MTD. I mean, after I graduated from UCSB in 1983 and started here in 1984. I'll never remember that first day. I started as a maintenance analyst, and I come in and there's this nice building over actually where the parts room is now, and then over on Olive Street was this big metal building with bus parts, and there was a little shack attached to it. And my introduction to MTD was being brought into that little shack, and there was a stack of work orders about yay high, and I go, "Have at it, Brad."
Hey, so you think you're telling me things really haven't changed much, huh?
But that was my inauspicious beginning at MTD. I don't know, it's been an opening came up in accounting a couple of years later, and that was an emphasis in my business economics degree. So I moved into that, and of course, that's what I've followed the track ever since then. Seen a lot since 1984. Mike, you've seen more, but I missed the Robert Yaco year, so I was here for the Gary, Sherry, Jerry show, and it's been a pleasure working for all of them. They all have excellent strengths that have complemented and helped in the growth of MTD. Jerry mentioned that I hired him. I was the manager of accounting, and I was in for an accounting clerk position. And, really, I didn't have a choice but to hire him. I had put together this accounting test that nobody had ever aced. And of course, he was the first one to do that. So I was like, "Dad, I guess I got to hire this guy." And those early years were good. I particularly remember your enjoyment of push starting my car a few times at the outset when anyway, I won't take too long. I'm not going to go through everything, but I put my all into MTD and after the completion of the, consolidated facility, it was kind of overwhelmed, and I took a break, and I left in 2002, and to take a sabbatical and do some traveling, et cetera. And the fact of the matter is, I never really left. 6 months later, I was working as a consultant, and I considered to continue to do so for the next few years before I was brought back on as a full-time employee. And I've been here back since 2007 since then, and managed to work my way back up to where I was when I left. So anyway, it's, MTD has been a good employer for me. They've treated me well, and I'd like to think that I returned the favor. I'm going to miss the people. I'm going to miss the challenges. It's a shame that in these last year and a half that the people aspect of it has lessened with the pandemic. And, I miss our regular birthday parties and the conference room where everybody would get together, and, it was some good times. And of course, back 30, 40 years ago, the good times were a little bit different. The world has changed since then, but, no more tequila slammers in the boardroom. So
I didn't hear that. Well, Brad, thank you so much for your service. Any board member who want to make any comments directly to Brad at this point? We'll come back at the end and we can talk about the two of them. I want to move over. Thank you, Brad. We'll move over for a second to a man I'm in awe of, Mike Cardona. Mike, you've been there 45 years. You've seen a little bit of change here. Christina?
Mhm. For Mike, in recognition for 45 years of distinguished service, including having served as superintendent of maintenance and interim manager of maintenance for Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District, acting as an integral leader in the district's early adoption and orchestration of battery electric vehicles, building MTD's reputation as one of the most effective and safe small city transit agencies in the country, representing MTD as a leader among employees during the many years of service, striving to improve MTD fleet for the betterment of the Santa Barbara community. Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District recognizes the exemplary and loyal service of Michael Cardona with great pride and heartfelt gratitude.
Fantastic. Mike, you want to unmute yourself if you can, and floor is yours, my friend.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, you sure
Okay.
can.
It's been a great time here. I've grown as I've met a lot of people, and the people I work with are great, and the general managers have all been great to me, and it's been nice working on an organization like this. They've taken care of me, and we put a lot of time in making things work. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
You're one of the unsung heroes in the entire community because you've kept this fleet running, and people don't realize basically what it takes to do that through thick and thin, through debris flows and everything else in the world, floods, but you've seen them all. You have seen them all. Fantastic service in that regard. Jerry, you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah, happy to do so. Yeah, I just again wanted to reiterate what I said before. Mike and Brad, on behalf of the entire staff, thank you. Thank you for many years of service and the dedication to the community. We're grateful for it and wish you the best in retirement. Thank you.
Great. Paula, you have your hand raised.
I do. Thank you, Chair. After listening to the both of them, first of all, I want to thank them both so much for their service and dedication and all the years they served the MTD. But, it started me thinking about their next journey. And I would hope that their next journey would include possibly being a spokesperson persons for MTD when we're trying to recruit, and tell your story somehow, some way, of how you worked your way up and all that you've received and benefited from MTD. So when we're looking for others, you have a personal story to share. And I don't know, I think that would be kind of a cool idea, but I don't want to interrupt your plans. I mean, you may be doing traveling, who knows, but I wish you well, both of you, very well and well in your retirement. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's with joy and like I say, bittersweet to be losing both of you at this point in time. But it's been our pleasure to work for you. Arjun, you want to say something?
Yeah, I figured I'd jump in here for, the both of them, Brad and for Mike, specifically for Mike, in terms of the service department. I mean, working with you, you always had this demeanor of like, just positivity and calmness, a calmness to the storm kind of thing. So I really respected that and do respect that. Also, Dennis Smith with the Department of Energy, with the Clean Cities organization, just retired. And during that retirement ceremony, he harkened back to the stories of the Olympics in Chattanooga. And at the time, as many of you or some of you may know, natural gas buses were really a thing. Natural gas was really in the limelight there, in the spotlight. And also our electric buses were out there. It's the electric bus fleet, and with you guys out there working, Mike, going out there and working on that project. And Dennis, they said that was his first, I think to organize that, the transportation around that event was one of his first endeavors. He got thrown into it as when he got hired. So I really appreciate you. And I think that story represents the national perspective of what MTD has been able to do over the years with the electric shuttle program, and what's to come, what you've built here, what the organization has been able to build here. I remember one of the quotes in one of the bus meetings or the events back in the day was, all the buses you see on the screen, the red are dead, and the ones that are up are alive, the greens are alive or something like that. And there was very few electric buses that were still running to date. So I just really want to appreciate you for all that, those efforts and in the trenches, real work that had to get done on a day-to-day basis. And Brad, again, your demeanor and positivity, you're always bringing a smile to whenever I worked with you or got our interactions and whatnot. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you all. Thank you both for your service and work. Congratulations. Enjoy the next part of your journey. Mike and Brad 2.0 going to be a lot more fun than 1.0, I'm sure. So both of you enjoy your retirement and whatever else you get involved in from this point on. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
A little hard to do this virtually, but the best we could do under these circumstances. Thank you again, Noel.
Dave, can I say one thing?
You can say anything you'd like, Chuck.
I'm sorry, my video's messed up, but I had the pleasure of working with both of these gentlemen. In fact, Brad was on the interview team that hired me, and I appreciated the job, but working some of those 50-hour weeks, I wasn't so sure it was a good move. But anyway, I was able to work side by side with Brad on many things. And quite frankly, when I did, I felt like I was underachieving compared to what he did. He was so smart and so businesslike, and still kept his sense of humor. And I really admired that. And, it's going to be hard to find somebody that good. And as far as Mike is concerned, Mike, I really admired you because I worked with you on several different things when we re-engineered engined those old GMC buses. And I admire the cool way you handle your old temperamental boss, Ralph. I mean, you were very diplomatic. He was quite a guy. And I really admired him, but you really had to know how to work around him. So I appreciate the cool that you had during that time and all your talent that you had in keeping that shop going. So I really congratulate both of you for good careers, and I'm thankful that I was able to work with both of you.
Thanks for those comments, Chuck. Thank you both again, and we hope to see you around. Right? Don't lose contact. Okay. Madam Clerk, we're going to move on then to item 9. This is fiscal year 2021 year-end financial review. Mr. Estrada?
Yeah. Chair Davis, board members, I'm going to hand this right off to Mr. Davis for his final presentation, wrapping up the last fiscal year's financial update for you. Brad?
Great, Brad, you're on.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. Can't get rid of me just yet. Can we go to the next slide, please? Who's ever in charge of the slideshow? Thank you. We came into the fiscal year 21, which ended last June 30th, knowing that we were going to have a deficit, a rather significant deficit because of the fare suspension. And this kind of summarizes the results for that period. This chart does not take into account the CARES Act funding that does end up balancing our budget, but just wanted to give this big picture overview of our operating results, with the green representing our revenues, the yellow expenses, and then the red, the shortfall between the two. And on the far right, excuse me, I got my right and my left. Yeah, on the far right is our actual results for the fiscal year. And as you can see, we had a shortfall of $5.6 million. And as I explained, that was backfilled with our CARES Act funding, specifically the one of 3 programs, and the federal relief funding is providing support for MTD. I think it's really important to note that without that federal funding, things would have been significantly different. I think can't say for certain exactly what happened, but we certainly would have had to cut service more, and I think layoffs would have been inevitable. We do have reserve funds, which we could have used that as well to defray some of the shortfall. But really, we're very fortunate for the federal government to support those additional funds. And to enable us to, carry on business at a fair percentage of what we were at before the pandemic started. Next slide, please. These are some of the key financial factors that resulted in basically the shortfall. Of course, the first one is the fare suspension, which I've already discussed. That actually went into place in March of 2020, just before the new fiscal year. And it was done as a way to reduce risk for employees and our passengers of exposure to the coronavirus, and enabled us to do a rear door alighting and loading, and eliminated having to handle fares, which by other employees. So it was a necessary action. At the same time, our service level was cut in reaction mainly to reduced demand as a result of school closures and shelter-in-place orders and things of that nature. So we cut back our a number of services, leaving our core services in place. This obviously affected our operating expenditures actually to bring those down, and unfortunately exacerbating the problem somewhat in maintaining the service level was the driver shortage. We came in before the pandemic, and for a few years before that, always trying to keep up with a full full employment level of our drivers. This unfortunately got worse during the pandemic for, some for obvious reasons, and probably the biggest one being also that we were unable to recertify drivers with the DMV not doing any testing. So again, that also was able to, and for a few years before that, always try. I just heard an echo, so hopefully not everybody else is not hearing that. In any event, then the next item I want to mention is the strength of sales tax. We've been over this, for the last several meetings, or excuse me, financial reports, and I just want to, reemphasize how important that was in keeping our deficit from the much lower level of $8 million that was initially anticipated. And then, of course, the federal relief funding. That is what was our saving grace for the preceding matters. So if you could, next slide, please. All right. Our total operating revenue for the year was, I think it was $19 million. And these are the three largest sources that normally provide that. Obviously, the fares were down for the year, and so for obvious reasons, and so that did not contribute. As far as the sales tax includes both our the quarter-cent statewide sales tax that is dedicated to public transit and under the Transportation Development Act, as well as the MTD's portion of the 0.5% countywide Measure A sales tax. So those have been combined in there, and with that figure up above $10 million, it's really providing, at least in the most recent fiscal year, more than 50% of our operating revenue before the CARES Act funding. So it is obviously it's a key source. And then when we take into account the federal funds, they were stable essentially for the last few years. Combined together, those actually make up close to 90% of our revenue for the year. So,
Brad, do you want questions as you go, or do you want to hold them to the end?
I'm fine with taking questions throughout. I mean,
okay. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask your question. Don't look for me to recognize it. I had a question on the federal. That's including or excluding CARES?
That is excluding CARES.
Right.
So
okay.
Yeah, when we add that in there, it obviously brings it much closer to the sales tax revenue, and between those two, it's providing definitely the vast majority of our operating income in this year, and less so last year, as at the onset wasn't until the final the final quarter of that year. Let's see. I can't remember, was there anything else? Not included is another important source of income, has become more important than in recent years. Our subsidies received for providing specific transit services, and these include the UCSB support for the Line 28, as well as boosting of the Express 12X, 24X line, and also support for the first last mile shuttle from SB CAG serving the Amtrak commuter train. Of course, those dropped considerably during this most recent year, as those services were not being provided as a result of demand. Only the 1224 remained in place. And just real briefly, some of our remaining income sources are the property tax revenue, interest income, and advertising sales, but really these make up a very small part of our overall income, and was under 2% actually in fiscal year 21. All right, excuse me, I've got a sheet here that is acting up that I am referring to. Anyway, that completes the discussion of those key revenues. And if you could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, this slide it's limited to the fair revenue aspect. And really the only reason, I've talked about it enough already, the main reason I included it is because I wanted to add in fiscal year 19 actuals, and that is the last year that were not affected by the pandemic. And as can be seen here, our fair revenue at that point was up above $7 million. It contracted in fiscal year 20 as a result of our fare suspension and during the last quarter. And of course, this year we didn't begin charging fares again, collecting fares until into a couple of weeks into May. So obviously, we knew those levels were going to be low. But the main point was to show where we were the pre-pandemic world, and just FYI, budgeted for the fiscal year 22, which we're currently in, is fair revenue of $2.5 million. Now, in the first quarter, for cash and pass sales revenue from fares, we are seeing better than expected results that were anticipated in the budget. So, can't say for certain, but hopefully we're going to see more of an improvement than we had first anticipated. But we will see. Next slide, please. This slide covers sales tax revenue. I've kind of talked that one to death over the last 9 months, but just I wanted to put up here the final results for the full year, which you haven't seen before. Those are monthly sales tax receipts for the fiscal year, with the green area representing receipts in fiscal year 21 and the blue line showing those receipts for the prior fiscal year. And it is quite interesting to see, in my mind at least, that from up to that dotted line, which covers both the pre and post pandemic. I mean, the fares are, the sales tax revenue is right in line for both periods, even after the onset of the pandemic. And then on the last few months, the blue line emphasizes what losses we did occur in sales tax revenue at the onset of the pandemic, and was largely responsible for these initial pessimistic projections of the sales tax revenue, which thankfully did not come to fruition. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, before getting into operating expenses, I just want to cover revenue hours briefly, as that is obviously a key component in determining what our operating costs are for the year. As expected, the revenue hours are down substantially in fiscal year 21. The yellow portion or mustard portion represents what our budgeted hours were, and we actually came in at less than that. And prior to that, the 2009 hours in fiscal year 20 started to take account of those service suspensions that had gone into place. So for the budgeted hours, we knew we were suspending 27,000 hours, so which was a substantial cut relative to what we've done in the past, in the neighborhood of in excess, I think it was 11%. And unfortunately, with the continuing increasing shortage of drivers, service was cut further, as we were not able to support all the route services that we wanted to, and that has resulted in a further contraction. Now, for the current fiscal year 22, we budgeted 193,000 revenue hours. So we're expecting to see an upswing in that. Actually, I don't have all the current information about driver hiring results, but regardless, we're anticipating a higher service level in the current year. Okay, with this backdrop, let's move on to operating expenses. If I go to the next slide, please. Okay, for the total year, as I indicated here, our operating expenditures were $25 million. And that compares from 27.3 million in the prior fiscal year. Of course, this is not unexpected with a reduction in the service level. And it kind of, this particular slide is concentrated on wages and benefits, and not just drivers, but all employee wages and benefits. And fringe benefits do actually include workers' compensation as well. But just wanted to emphasize with the blue representing the fiscal year 21 and the green covering the prior year. While the bars themselves don't seem to indicate a lot of change, these 10% and 6% changes add up to quite a bit of funds that are responsible for about $1.7 million in reduced operating costs in fiscal year 21. So next slide, please. And this slide covers the remaining operating expenditures, and it specifically excludes wages and benefits. And so just to start with risk, which again, this time we do have workers' comp in there, along with liability costs, general liability. And actually the results for workers' comp were excellent for fiscal year 21. There's a 35% reduction, and it overall resulted in more than $500,000 in reduced costs relative to the prior year. As far as our fleet fuel, between the service level reduction and a sharp drop in our fixed price fuel contract that took place mid-year, we were able to see a substantial savings in fuel costs, and specifically for renewable diesel fuel. And the end result there was a 27% increase, which was close to $500,000. Materials and supplies, and that's about half of that is composed of actually bus parts issued for work done in the shop. Actually, that's up a little bit from the prior year because they've been doing more in-house work during the course of the pandemic, as there's been a little bit more time to bring in capital repairs that previously were difficult to get into and were farmed out. But with the lower fleet level, been able to expand some of the work into which is carried out in-house. There were other reductions in material supplies associated with the smaller service footprint, and that more than offset that. So there was a small reduction in materials and supplies cost for the year. With respect to service and utilities, really the main reason for the reduction relative to both the budget and to the prior fiscal year is the fact that the short-range transit plan was deferred until the current fiscal year 22, and it's well underway. That had originally been slated for last fiscal year, but with all of the activity with planning dealing with the service adjustments, it was necessary to defer that work. And lastly, our paratransit expenses, which represents payments to EasyLift for the provision of our ADA paratransit service. And the orange column representing the budget, that was increased as a result of setting up an allowance of a little over $360,000 to cover to pass through any federal relief funding to EasyLift in order to make up for any losses related to the pandemic. EasyLift was able to limit any such losses through service adjustments, and did not have a budget deficit for their paratransit service. And so it turned out that federal relief funds were not necessary to pass through to them. And really, that completes the operating expenses discussion. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, this is you may have noted that in the report provided as part of the board packet, I briefly discussed federal relief funding, but I didn't get into the numbers behind it or the sources. So I just wanted to provide a little update on where those are. This is one of those combination charts where the columns represent our usage of federal relief funding and utilizes the left axis, so the one that runs from 0 to 10 million, whereas the green line chart represents the federal relief balance available to MTD and utilizes the right axis, so that goes from 0 to $40 million. So really, the important point is to show in fiscal year 20, we received the initial FAIRS Act funding. And then it was in fiscal year 22 that we received another, well, I guess I didn't mention it, the CARES Act funding came to a little over 16 million. And in fiscal year 21, the government approved both the CRISA and ARPA bills that provided additional economic relief support, and MTD was allocated a little over 20 million for that. So initially our overall allocation was close to $37 million. And so this chart shows the usage of that so far. I've included what's anticipated for the current fiscal year 22. And so we see the initial bump up from the additional funds in fiscal year 21 on the green line. And then we're anticipated to have a balance of about 22 million at the end of the current fiscal year. And then the remaining amount will continue to offset eligible expenses and revenue losses and capital projects in the coming fiscal years. Next slide, please. And I'm going to close with capital projects. I'm going to limit this conversation as our next agenda item is a report from Ryan Grip on the status of our capital projects. So I'm just going to concentrate on the actual acquisitions that took place in fiscal year 2021. As far as the bus acquisitions, generally that represents the final payments to BYD for the 8 of the buses that we purchased outright, as well as lease payments for the capital lease for an additional 6 buses. The bus improvements, the bulk of that outlay is for the addition of the driver barriers in most of the fleet. We're still working on the electric buses, the barrier installation is taking place in the current fiscal year, but that was installed again as to reduce exposure to the coronavirus and enabled us to begin fare collection again. So it was a very important project to get us back on a little more solid foundation, solid financial foundation with fare collection. I'm going to skip to the passenger facilities, and really the bulk of that outlay is the final project, or excuse me, the final, basically the completion of the transit center renovation, which with costs stretching into September when it was reopened. And then just a few miscellaneous items. The other equipment, the $130,000, most of that is for additional Chevy Bolt vehicles, which enabled us to fully replace our driver relief vehicle fleet with emission-free vehicles. And I think there was one more. Yeah, I think that covers the main points. And just very briefly, the funding that supported these projects was Measure A, state transit assistance, which is the other arm of the Transportation Development Act, which MTD dedicates to our capital budget. And then the federal funding, which in this case was CARES Act funding to pay for the driver barrier installations. And that completes my presentation for fiscal year 2021. And of course, happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Great. Any questions from the board at this point? Director Tabor, Dave.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Brad managed to answer all my questions with his comments during the presentation. I just wanted to comment that his graph ability has reached its peak. I think I could have known everything I needed to know just by watching that slide presentation rather than reading through the graphs and then the report. So well done there. The only remaining question I have is I didn't see a line item in there for retirement party. Is that going to be something you just slip into the CARES Act funding, or how's that going to be handled?
Well, I thought that was buried in another line item. I'm not quite sure how you got that. It's a pretty large budget, but we'll make do.
Full disclosure document for sure. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item?
I don't have any email or hands raised.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions from the board? If not, this was a presentation. Brad, thank you again for this. And I compliment you also on your graphs. You actually even lost me on one of them. So, okay, what can I say? Okay, thank you very much, Brad.
Thank you.
Let's add on then to item 10. This is the annual capital projects update. Jerry, Mr. Estrada, do you want to open this up to our two presenters?
Absolutely. I'll be asking Mr. Grip, Mr. Rapinski to handle this presentation together. It'll be providing you an update or project perspective on all of our ongoing capital projects. We hope maybe in a month, we're going to come back with a presentation from Ms. Blackerby to kind of tie this all together from a service perspective. But for today, it's about the capital projects and what the status is of each of them. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ryan and David. It's all yours.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Davis, members of the board. Thank you all. Appreciate it. I'm joined by my colleague, and we'll be providing you with of the current capital projects. Next slide, please. So this is a breakdown of the actual project category. So today we'll be discussing facilities projects, equipment projects, and planning projects. For the board members, I want to let you know that we want this to be interactive. So after we get done with the category, if you have any questions about a specific project that we addressed, please feel free to chime in and we're happy to answer.
Yeah, and please chime in. Don't look for me to recognize you. Just ask your questions if you could. That would make the presentation flow better. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Davis. So for our facilities projects that we're going to be talking about today, we have our Terminal 2 recommissioning project. That is broken up into multiple phases. So we're going to be talking about the first phase of that. The Charge Ready Bridge project, which is a project that we're working on with Southern California Edison. And then finally, our Haley Street electric bus charging canopy upgrade project. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I will pass it along to my colleague, Mr. Rapinski.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, Chair Davis and members of the board. Terminal 2, located at 5353 Overpass Road in the city of Goleta. As Ryan mentioned, we're going to approach this as a multi-phase project. This was actually an operating facility up until 2004. And then earlier this year, the decision was to recommission and open it back up for business. And with the intent to, one, just overall improve operating efficiencies, put MTD in a better position, both by reducing deadhead hours and miles, fuel savings associated with serving Goleta, City of Goleta and UCSB, and ultimately providing some relief to Terminal 1 with regard to bus parking. Madam Clerk, next slide, please. So this first phase is designed to prepare the facility for operations and maintenance of up to 10 vehicles. Your board was gracious enough to approve an on-call contract with Stantec Architecture to provide the agency with the design, cost out, provide cost projections, prepare plan documents for submittal, provide bid support during our processes, and ultimately construction support as part of that Stantec contract. We've been fortunate as staff's been working closely with Stantec and have already launched. We've started off with the development of the schematic designs with the intent to ratchet down a list of improvements, which I'll go over in a moment. And then once your general manager and staff have decided, Stantec will go back and cost those out to further allow the agency to decide what will move forward. We're on target to get that done by early December. Next slide, please. So there are 12 improvements in total that Stantec identified that would allow Terminal 2 to open back up for business. I won't go over every single improvement, but just to highlight real briefly, the opening will this recommissioning effort will include re-fencing of the entire perimeter of the property, security lighting and cameras. We're going to add an above ground fuel tank. We're going to redo the existing bus wash. More importantly, we're going to modify the canopies, the bus parking canopies, to allow for photovoltaic electric charging in the future for the bus fleet that will be all electric at some point in time in the future. And then finally, there's an existing building there now. So that building will receive minor improvements to allow staff to reoccupy it, to allow for the operations and maintenance for those 10 vehicles that will ultimately be shifting over to Terminal 2. So next slide, please. Once we've finished the schematic design portion, the idea is Stantec will either continue moving forward with those 12 improvements once we've seen the cost, or they will be reduced and take the form of construction documents, which will be submitted to the City of Goleta by the end of January of 2022. Concurrently, staff is going to be working on solicitation for the services of a construction contractor in the form of an invitation for bids. The idea would be to release that in the spring of 2022, ultimately getting that construction contractor on board by the summer of 2022 with a target to hopefully complete all the construction necessary, these 12 items possibly, to get this facility up and ready within 9 months after that summer launch of getting that construction contractor on board. So I know I've gone through that rather quickly, but as Ryan's alluded to, we'll answer any questions you can have after that. But I'd like to turn this back over to Ryan to basically walk you through Terminal 1 improvements.
Next slide, please. Thank you, David. So as David mentioned, we're traveling back to Terminal 1, and this is our Charge Ready Bridge project that's currently underway. So really the high level of this project is that we are installing 14 ChargePoint CPE 250 heavy-duty chargers under the maintenance canopy that you see highlighted in those photographs to the right. That's the maintenance canopy where we have a raised roof that's adjacent to the maintenance offices right off of Salsapueta Street. Now, as I mentioned before, this project is unique in that it's divided between MTD components of the project and SCE components of the project. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial view of the canopy itself, and we've overlaid bus parking onto the canopy to give the audience a frame of reference of where the buses will be parking. And you can see between the buses, there are red rectangles. That's where the actual chargers will be installed. Again, there will be 14 chargers that will accommodate up to 14 buses. As you can see from the arrows, so the rectangles are the buses, the arrows in front of the buses are the direction that the bus is facing. Currently, what's depicted is that they're all facing Haley Street. The purpose of this is because for ingress and egress, they'll be coming in off of the Coda Street side of the canopy, and then they will pull into the parking underneath the canopy and then pull out going the direction of Haley Street. We believe because of the constraints of this canopy, it's very, very tight, that this will be the best flow. Now, the good thing is the way that this is designed and where the chargers are located is we can actually reverse the flow if needed. So if on day one, after the chargers are installed, and we start placing buses, if it's determined that we need to switch the direction of ingress and egress, we can do so. Another component of this that's key to the success is we will have on our New Flyer buses front charge ports and rear charge ports. So it provides that level of flexibility. Now, just to highlight a couple elements of what MTD's general contractor will be responsible for is SCE goes as far as the disconnect switches at each of the charger location. Our general contractor will then put in additional conduit and cable from the disconnect switches to the actual chargers themselves. Next slide, please. So since we were going forward with this work, there were some additional facilities improvements that we wanted to add on. As you can see from the top right picture, there's a square patch. That's an asphalt patch on concrete. That concrete has been degrading over time, and we're taking the opportunity of this project to go ahead and pull out that asphalt patch, and we're going to go ahead and put in new concrete. You also see a circular asphalt patch that's darker. Recently, we had a failure of a drain pipe. So again, added on to the project will be the replacement of the drain pipe from the inlet that you see in the picture all the way to South Sequetta Street. Now, a key component of this project, it's important to note, this is the responsibility of SCE and MTD, is in this area, there are known soil contaminants. So as that asphalt is dug up, our contractor will be responsible for proper remediation. A work plan has been developed and submitted to the County of Santa Barbara for this work to take place, but that will be an element of the project for our general contractor. And then finally, a functional and aesthetic improvement. We'll be replacing the fence line along South Sequetta Street. We'll be putting in a new 8-foot automatic gate, and the fence and gate will match the ornamental fencing that we have on Coda and Olive Street frontages. Next slide, please. So this is a depiction of the work that SCE is going to be doing, and I'll be real high level about it. As you can see from the text boxes, we're going to start at the bottom. So SCE is going to pull power from an active street pole on Olive Street. They're going to use existing conduit that was installed when in early 2000s when the administrative building was built, the bus wash and other structures on the property. So fortunately, we have that existing conduit. They're going to pull the new cable all the way to the new 1500 kVA transformer. Now, we have an existing transformer there. It's about a third of the output. It's a 500 kVA. So as part of the Charge Ready project, SCE is putting in this new transformer, which in effect triples the output. From the transformer, they're going to be trenching across the South Sequetta driveway into South Sequetta Street and then back onto MTD's property adjacent to the maintenance offices. At that point, they're going to install new switch gear and an SCE meter. From the new gear and meter, they're going to go over to the canopy where the 14 chargers will be located. They're going to go up the canopy, and all of the conduit will actually be run underneath the roof of the canopy. And where each of the 14 chargers will be going, they'll go ahead and run the conduit down existing structure members that are there. So that gives you an idea of the SCE portion of the work, and that will be taking place concurrently with MTD's portion. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen between the two. Next slide, please. So to give a rough idea of the timeline, so the design is completed. As you've seen, there are a couple of drawings that were available and provided during the presentation. The plans, both SCE's and MTD's, are currently under review at the City of Santa Barbara for permitting. The invitation for bids, that's just something that MTD has to do. SCE has contractors on hand once the project is permitted, and currently that's in progress. In fact, the job walk is scheduled for tomorrow with prospective bidders. And then the construction taking place winter of 2022. We're anticipating in terms of length of construction about 4 months for that project. Next slide, please. So our next project that we're working on is the Haley Charging Canopy Upgrade. So to provide the audience with a bit of background, when we onboarded the BYD buses, we had to upgrade existing electric vehicle infrastructure that we had along South Sequetus and Haley streets. We upgraded the original 208 volt charging. That was for our shuttle fleet to 480 to accommodate the BYD buses. We created 15 charge ports for the 14 buses, 11 of which are on South Sequetus and 4 of which are along Haley Street. So we have 10 more charge ports, 208 volt charge ports from our original shuttle fleet that need to be upgraded to 480 to accommodate future bus acquisitions. And that's really what this project is all about. Next slide, please. So general scope, as we talked about, the conversion of 10208 to 480. A key component that's important for the audience to note is that the acquisition and installation of the chargers themselves is not part of the scope, but staff is actively seeking grant monies to be able to pay for the chargers. And if that comes to fruition prior to execution of the actual project, we'll go ahead and add that as part of the scope. And the other component is a facilities improvement. We're going to replace the existing driveway apron at the Haley Street entrance. The reason is the current slope is such that some of our buses, when entering the property off of Haley Street, actually bottom out. So that will help to prevent that from taking place in essence. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick visual of what we talked about. Again, the left, the yellow is all South Sequetus, and that's BYD chargers. The top portion is Haley Street, and 4 of those areas are BYD chargers. And then the remainder in orange will be where the conversion will take place from existing 208 to 480. Next slide, please. So this is the project timeline. We're looking at finalizing the design in winter of 22, and the plan submitted to the city of Santa Barbara spring of 2022. The invitation for bid happening shortly thereafter, and then construction fall of 2022. Next slide, please. So I wanted to provide a quick high-level summary of the charging infrastructure at Terminal 1. So what do we have, or what will we have when those 2 preceding projects that we talked about are complete? Currently, we have the 14 light-duty charge ports that you see in the lower left. That serves our fleet of Chevrolet Bolts. Where we were just talking about with the SCE Charge Ready Bridge project underneath the canopy, that will add 14 heavy-duty charge ports. Moving to the right along South Sequetus, we have the 11 heavy-duty charge ports. Those are currently in existence, as we talked about, for the BYD fleet. And then down below that, we have the 14 heavy-duty charge ports along Haley Street, comprised of 4 charge ports for the BYD buses, and then the remainder with the Haley Street project that we were talking about. Next slide, please. So moving on to equipment projects, we have the New Flyer 40-foot battery electric bus acquisition project, Ford Transit battery electric passenger van acquisition project, and of course the fleet renewal campaign. Next slide, please. So diving right into these beautiful new 40-foot New Flyer battery electric buses. As the board probably recalls, the original project called for 4 40-foot battery electric buses. MTD recently received additional $3.8 million to add another 5 40-foot battery electric buses onto that acquisition. Currently, our team, our procurement team, is looking into the idea of just simply adding the 5 to the original 4 for continuity and the ability to have a sizable subfleet to really test out to see the viability of the New Flyer product. The new battery electric buses are part of the NG variant. The NG is an upgrade to the Excelsior platform It's faster, it's lighter, it's more efficient. It sounds like a sales pitch, but I've seen some of the numbers. It seems impressive. And the range has been increased as well. So this is kind of exciting that we will receive the latest variant of New Flyer's battery electric bus product. Next slide, please. And here's a visual of what MTD's New Flyer battery electric buses will look like. The design was approved by the board in consultation with the public. Very excited about the new look and feel. Next slide, please. So some funding, good news on the funding front. As the board may recall, at the onset of the acquisition of the 4 buses, one of which we went ahead and went after HVIP monies, which we were able to receive an HVIP voucher. The value of that is $138,000. And then for 3 of the 4 buses, we looked into the California Mitigation Trust, and we received $180,000 per bus out of that pool of monies as well. So the combined 138 and 540 will make a significant difference in terms of the overall cost. And of note too, with the 5 additional battery electric buses that I was mentioning to get us to 9, we'll also be going after HVIP vouchers. And in fact, HVIP opens again towards the end of this month. So we'll be moving very quickly on those additional 5. Next slide, please. So the project timeline, so the procurement, as I mentioned, for the additional 5 is ongoing, but the team is working very quickly to bring that to a conclusion. For the first 4, obviously that's been completed. Pre-production meeting and spec selections for the New Flyer bus has all been done, and the production will take place in Q3 2022, and the first bus of the potentially 9 will also be delivered Q3 of 2022. In terms of the way that New Flyer's production schedule works, after we receive the first one, we should receive every 2 weeks another bus. Next slide, please. So the Ford Transit battery electric passenger van acquisition, this is a look at the approved design of these vehicles. These vehicles will be used for MTD's new microtransit service with total seating capacity of 9 and reduced a little bit, 7 with a mobility device. Next slide, please. I wanted to provide the board with a sneak peek. So this is the first bus off the production line. There's some additional work that's taking place to the van. There's some additional work that's taking place to the interior of the van, but this is what all 3 of them will look like. Next slide, please. Now, one of the nice things about these vans is versatility. And, you know, infrastructure is a challenge, as we've discussed many times at prior board meetings. The good thing about these vans is we can use our light duty chargers that we currently have installed for our bolts, or we can use the new heavy duty chargers that will be installed as part of the Charge Ready Bridge project. And that will allow us to kind of move those units around where needed. So that versatility is pretty refreshing with that particular subfleet, and is most welcome. Next slide, please. So I will cut to the delivery. That's the most important part of the acquisition schedule. And these 3 battery electric vans are scheduled to arrive to MTD next month. Next slide, please. So this is an EV equipment summary. This gives a breakdown of the electric vehicles that MTD has in its fleet. As we've talked about before, Chevrolet Bolts, there are 14 of those, and they serve as relief vehicles. We have coming very shortly the 3 electric Ford Transit passenger vans. We currently are operating the 14 30-foot BYD battery electric buses. And as we talked about, we will have 9 40-foot battery electric buses. So the EV fleet is growing very quickly. Next slide, please. And the fleet renewal campaign, this is, I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Rapinski. David?
The final capital project related to equipment is the fleet renewal campaign. In essence, what it is, it's a vehicle refurbishment. Some agencies choose to do full-on midlife vehicle refurbishments as an effort to save money and extend the useful life of equipment. Others just choose to refurbish components of equipment. What MTD is going to do is a hybrid of both of those methodologies. Your board awarded a contract to Complete Coachworks based here in California, a 3-year contract earlier in the year. We're looking to, as part of this fleet renewal campaign, to extend the useful life of some select vehicles, which I'll go into in a little bit, to make some passenger improvements, to make some driver improvements, to ultimately, Ryan showed you how good the fleet looks in terms of the new MTD graphic scheme. We're going to basically get the older vehicles all caught up as part of that same effort too, so you have continuity and uniformity throughout the fleet. And we were also looking to create a process whereby in costs identified to allow the agency, if MTD were to choose and if funding were available, to pursue optional fleet improvements. And I'll also get into that in a little bit as well. So next slide, please. So in total, 85 vehicles will make up this fleet renewal campaign. They're aggregated into 3 groupings. The groupings were decided based on tremendous amount of input from your maintenance department. And it was decided based on remaining useful life, life and duty cycle, and a few other variables in terms of how this breakout was to occur. But this makes up the process whereby we're going to start the campaign with group 1, and then we'll just basically go in order as we complete one grouping. We'll move on to the next. So next slide, please. The super summary of Group 1's buses, and that's the 2011 Gilligs. There's 7 of them. They were chosen because they were nearing their FTA mandated replacement cycle of 15 years. These vehicles are workhorses for the staff. Maintenance department loves them. It was decided these 7 vehicles would be good candidates to extend that useful life, meaning we would go beyond that 15 years to continue using these vehicles to their fullest. As part of that, as part of the campaign itself, we're going to replace the engines, the transmissions, and the suspensions to add more the useful life to that equipment. And we're going to do the passenger amenities and the driver amenities I mentioned to you, listed here. We're going to replace the ADA restraint systems that are currently on those vehicles, and we're going to put in new ADA restraint systems throughout these 7 vehicles. And ultimately, as you can see on the right, these vehicles will now look just like as beautiful as the remainder of the fleet in terms of the new decal and painting scheme. Groups 2 and 3, a large proportion, 24 and 54 vehicles, will not have their useful life extended. However, we are going to continue with this same uniformity with regard to the same passenger amenities, the same driver amenities, as well as replacing that ADA restraint system. And then ultimately, we're going to get those remaining vehicles also up to speed with regard to the new paint and decal scheme. Next slide, please. So I did mention to you that flexibility that MTD was looking for in terms of optional items. As you can see here, it's a list. Complete Coachworks did provide us with the cost to do all of these items. Now, funding permitted, we may choose to do as an agency to do one or none of these optional items. But as you can see, as we go along, and if things were to be discovered, an example I'll give you is if we're replacing the driver window and we find that there's damage done to the existing windshield of a bus, well, we have that costing as an optional item. This gives the agency tremendous flexibility and no commitment with regard to paying for them until MTD decides and tells Complete Coachworks that these are the optional items that we wanted to pursue. Next item, please. Slide, please, excuse me. And then finally, we already have a pilot bus, a sample bus at the property of Complete Coachworks today. So, and that would be a vehicle from Group 1, one of the 7. It's anticipated that whole refurbishment of the Group 1 vehicles, all 7, will be completed by May of 2022. As soon as those vehicles are done, as I alluded to earlier, the next 24 vehicles in Group 2 will be done, and that will be projected to be completed by March of 2023. And then finally, the remaining 54 vehicles, the largest contingent of vehicles, will be completed in March of 2024. One important note for you is that Groups 1 and 2 were the two categories, the groupings that MTD committed to complete coach works that would be done. Group 3, we wanted to give MTD the most flexibility as possible. And the case in point is, while we're saying it's going to be 54 buses, should MTD get grant funding, like the grant funding that Ryan alluded to for 5 new electric vehicles, that would in fact reduce the number of vehicles that we're going to put through the campaign, and those would be drawn from Group 3. In essence, shrinking that number of 54 down to whatever number would be. Gives the agency the most flexibility because you'd be getting new vehicles and wouldn't need to put them through this refurbishment effort. So that would conclude the equipment portion of the capital project update. And Ryan, I'll turn it back to you either for board questions or for the next grouping.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Next slide, please. So the home stretch, the planning projects, we have the zero emission bus rollout plan and the transit asset management plan. What I will say is the capital project execution can't happen without some good capital projects planning. Next slide, please. So the zero emission bus rollout plan is a part of the California Air Resources Board Innovative Clean Transit Regulation. And in effect, what the Innovative Clean Transit Regulation requires is transit agencies within the state of California to acquire zero emission vehicles, typically either electric or hydrogen. For small agencies, which is how MTD is defined under ICT, our first series of zero emission vehicle acquisitions have to take place in 2026. Fortunately, we're well underway, as we talked about earlier, in terms of the number of zero emission vehicles that we have in our fleet. But a component of the ICT rollout is this zero emission bus rollout plan. And what it does is it provides to the California Air Resources Board the means and methods by which an agency will reach the ultimate goal in 2040 of having a zero emission fleet. So that's infrastructure, vehicle acquisitions, that's training for operators and technicians. That includes, the bus acquisitions themselves. So it's a holistic picture of how we're going to get to the CARB requirement. And as I mentioned before, MTD has made some very good strides to get there. And then the other component, the Transit Asset Management Plan, that's an FTA regulation. And in essence, that's for to keep all capital assets in a state of good repair. So that would be vehicles, rolling stock, that would be buildings, various facilities that we talked about. The original plan or the initial plan was submitted to FTA in October of 2018, and an updated plan is due October of 2022, which we'll be working on. Next slide, please. So finally, the timeline for the ZEB rollout plan. We are going to work with a consultant on the ZEB rollout plan. Now, fortunately, we've already done some of the work for this through the facilities master plan. So we're in good shape in terms of defining the scope of work for the consultant. It's less than perhaps what other agencies would engage a consultant to do. The contract execution is anticipated for February of 2022. Implementation, winter through spring of 2022, and the due date of the ZEB rollout plan to CARB is June 30th, 2023, and we will have the plan complete well in advance of that due date. Next slide, please. And the timeline for the Transit Asset Management Plan, that work will be done in-house as it was done for the original TAM plan. Implementation of development will be spring through summer of 2022, and the updated plan is due to FTA, as I mentioned before, in October of 2022. Next slide, please. And that concludes our presentation. One thing that I did want to mention is that, capital projects, and I think Mr. Rapinski would attest to this, we have the good fortune of working with the entire MTD team. who are incredibly supportive and helpful through all of these things. So I do want to give a shout out to the whole team and thank them for all the efforts that go into all these projects.
Well, Mr. Rapinski, that's a great presentation. Like, again, I took my breath away of how much stuff's going on. Pretty impressive, very, very impressive. So, and again, I thought the presentation was excellent. Questions or comments from the board? Mr. McCory, Director McCory. Chuck.
This seems like a nit after that mind-blowing presentation, but I have a question about the new gate on Olive. Was that on Olive Street?
Celso Puedes.
Okay, so there's not going to be a new gate on Olive then?
No, just the existing one that we have on South Cepuedes, we're going to replace so that it looks like, good question about Olive Street. We have that ornamental fencing on Olive Street, and on South Cepuedes, we have a chain link fence and gate. So we're going to replace with the ornamental so everything is uniform around the perimeter of the property.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Director Purdy, Paula, and I'll go to Director Tabor.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One, I missed the date that was suggested that the Terminal 2 application would be going to the city of Goleta. I'd like to keep my eyes open for it, but I forgot what date you said, or I didn't hear it.
Right now, Stantec, and we're working to make a January 2022 date.
Wow.
And so we're trying to keep them to the fire. And our job is to ensure that any questions that come up, there's a lot of stop and go sometimes. And I know that Jerry's made it a point to say that we need to get Stantec's questions answered, and we don't want to be the cause of the delay. So far, so good. They've in fact reached out to the city of Goleta on a few occasions to find out some things, kind of planting seeds in terms of what would we should expect and what should we do in anticipation of. So I think we're in good shape for that January deadline.
Great. Good to hear. My second question would be on the Ford Transit battery electric passenger vans, the 3 vans that will be coming out next month. Those are the vans for our pilot program for curb service. So will that pilot program then beginning as soon as we have those vans?
I'll take that one. Our hope is to start it in March of 2022, but it really going to come down to the labor shortage and our ability to hire additional bus operators. But the goal would be March with that driver's bid that coincide with that.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Great report. Very exciting news. Thank you.
Director Tabor, Dave.
Thank you. I know our bus fleet is broken into chunks based on when they were purchased and the size of the engines and things like that. And I imagine a lot of decisions on which group to put the buses into for the improvements or based on that. I guess the question isn't for Ryan or Dave, but if that's the case, then in our quarterly reports, when we get a report on the fleet, can we see which groups those chunks would fall into?
I'll start off, and maybe Jerry, you might want to chime in, but we'll certainly keep you abreast when the campaign is going on. And if you're saying that you want to make sure that you know from the quarterly report perspective where we are in the campaign, if I think I understand you correctly, then we would actually make sure that we tie that in so you're kept abreast of how we're doing with the campaign itself.
What I would recommend, the clerk can make a note, follow up on this item. What we'll do is we'll probably add some narrative to the quarterly report, so we can leave the statistics reported maybe in the same format if that's acceptable, but add a narrative on an update on this particular project.
Good, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Madam Clerk, is there anyone from the public who wishing to speak on this item?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, great presentation, both of you. We'll look forward to getting updates as we go forward, but an aggressive program, and pretty exciting to think about just where we were a few years ago in terms of the changeover in the fleet. And boy, we are making tremendous strides. So thank you both for all the great work that you've done, and look forward to more of it in the future. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Takes us to item 11. This is the general manager's report, Mr. Estrada. Oh, by the way, Director Lemberger has to leave at 10:15. So Jen, at 10:15, when you check out, just give a little wave and you're good to go.
Okay, I'll be
Jerry.
brief. First of all, thank Mr. Grip and Mr. Rapinski for their work. A great presentation. And they're doing a fantastic job for us and the entire staff and coordinating that. As far as my general manager's report, just really two items. First of all, I'd like to highlight, we have kicked off our short range transit plan process with the public. We have a virtual listening session scheduled for tomorrow night at 5:30. I want to invite everyone to participate. You can get more information at our website, sbmtd.gov/MTD moves ahead. So we definitely would love to hear from the public and see what they think. I wanted to, acknowledge what, Brad had pointed out earlier, the timing of all this. The short range transit plan, we did get delayed a year because of the pandemic, the effort, which pushed back the strategic plan process because we wanted it to follow the short range transit plan. So, I apologize for that. I know the board is eager to get into the strategic plan process, but this is where we are right now. We really feel it's important to get through the SRTP process and get that public input to, so we have that information before we get into strategic plan soon thereafter. Other than that, what I wanted to highlight off the general manager's report, answer any questions you have, is our operations team stepping up again with the Olisol fire. We did receive, we were contacted, I think it was Monday night when it broke out, and asked to help, with some essentially transportation, getting some folks from the Amtrak station Santa Barbara to the shelter and back. And our team did a great job. Our supervisors, our drivers, and the operations management team, the drop of a hat to getting that done. And once again, I wanted to thank them and acknowledge their work. They've always answered the call, and they should be commended for that. That's pretty much everything I wanted to cover, but happy to answer any questions you might have from the GM report.
Any questions for Jerry at this point? Okay. Not seeing any. Okay, thank you for that report, Mr. Estrada. That will take us to items 12 and 13. These are two closed sessions. I will take the time to read them. Item 12 is a recess to closed session, real property negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. The property is 468 4678 Carial and 149 North San Antonio Road. The agency negotiators, General Manager Jerry Estrada, District Outside Counsel Graham Lyons. The negotiating parties are Chandler Partners and Con Ann Group. Under negotiation is the price in terms of payment. Item 13 is a recess to closed session on public employee performance evaluation. The board will meet in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957 and 54954.5 subsection E to evaluate the performance of the district's general manager. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone who wishes to speak on either item 12 or item 13, the two closed sessions?
I don't have any public comment.
Okay, with that then, we will stand in recess to closed session. Jerry, you want to take us out and get us into closed session, and we will reconvene, I'll say in 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Will do.